January 1968, 6 days before Khe Sanh. A radio intercept specialist photographs something in the Vietnamese jungle that makes his Huey malfunction every time they get close. The film comes back blank, all of it, except one frame. And when the men in black debriefed him, they had one question that would haunt him for 57 years. How did it make you feel? A recon detachment had gone silent after reporting a strange structure in the jungle about 25 clicks north of Lang Vay, right on the border with Laos. No structure existed on any land survey images of the area. The commanding officer, fresh out of school and probably thinking the Russians were testing something, sent a couple of men up in a Huey to get eyes on whatever this thing was. The veteran, who we'll call John, volunteered. He'd had enough of enemy communications to last a lifetime. Armed with a Nikon F camera with a 105mm lens, he went up with orders to report from the site and photograph whatever structure the recon team had found. They came in through Laos, and when they got within about a half a click from the coordinates, the Huey's tail rotor started to malfunction. Common problem, nothing to worry about. The pilot climbed higher above the tree line to give them more room in case it got worse. And just like that, the rotor was fine again. Then they saw it. Black. Not just black, but black in a way that shouldn't exist in nature. It looked like solid-state motor oil, if that makes any sense. Shiny like frozen liquid mercury, but without any physical signs of actually being frozen. The surface looked like polished glass, and yet the material seemed to move at times, like a lightly disturbed body of water. That movement produced random iridescence across the surface, colors shifting and dancing in patterns that had no source. As they got closer to the clearing it had either created or chosen, the rotor began to malfunction again. The pilot was good, though, one of the best, and regained control. But he couldn't get control until they were within a certain distance away from the thing. It was as if the craft itself, and John called it a craft because he didn't know what else to call it, was interfering with their equipment just by existing. When they finally stabilized at a safe distance, John radioed back with a situation report. He was ordered to get his photos and return to base immediately. He said he damn near sprained his finger clicking that shutter button. Once he'd burned through a few rolls, he swapped the film again and took a final few shots just for himself. Good thing he did, too. He stowed that roll away in the lining of his unused pilot helmet on the floor of the Huey and put in a fresh roll. The moment their skids touched down at Khe Sanh, a security detail escorted them to a room on base. What happened next, John said, was unlike anything he'd experienced in all of his years of service. 2 men in black fatigues with no name badges, no rank insignia, no introductions. They aggressively debriefed him, searching him thoroughly, confiscated all his film, and made him sign an NDA stating he would never talk about what he saw or the debrief itself. But there was one question they asked that he would never forget. The strangest question of the entire ordeal. How did the craft make you feel? It was the only time they referred to it as a craft, and John was almost positive it was a mistake. A slip of the tongue that revealed they knew exactly what it was. How did it make him feel? What kind of a question is that? He didn't even remember how he answered. He thought he said sick or uneasy, something to that effect. But his response to that question was the only thing he remembered them writing down. The next morning, John went to recover the roll of film he'd hidden in the helmet. The helicopter was gone, not just moved. The entire aircraft had been decommissioned and loaded onto a C-130. Somebody said they'd heard the men in black fatigues had come from FO before. What were they already doing in Vietnam? But the pilot helmets were sitting on a pile of rucksacks nearby, and the roll of film was exactly where he'd left it. John spent another 9 months in theater before he returned stateside and had a chance to develop the photos. Every single image came back with the most bizarre anomaly he'd ever seen. In every photo but one, the clearing where the craft was sitting was centered perfectly, but the entire area was nothing but a big green blur, as if something about the craft itself had interfered with the film emulsion. He wondered what the confiscated rolls looked like. The one photo that did come out was the last one he took, shot as they were pulling away and he was losing the angle. Now, you might be thinking, this is just another unverifiable story from an anonymous source. You'd be right to be skeptical. But John's account fits a pattern that's been emerging for decades. Vietnam-era UFO encounters weren't isolated incidents. In 1966, during Operation Blue Book, multiple pilots reported spherical objects pacing their aircraft over North Vietnam. These weren't enemy aircraft. They moved in ways that defied physics as we understood it then, and frankly, as we understand it now. In 1969, an Army unit near Da Nang reported a disc-shaped craft hovering silently over their firebase for nearly 20 minutes before it shot straight up and disappeared. The official report listed it as a weather phenomenon. In the Mekong Delta, river patrol boats encountered submerged objects that would surface, hover briefly, then dive back underwater at impossible speeds, leaving no wake, no disturbance in the water. And then there's the case that mirrors John's experience most closely. In March or April of 1997, nearly 30 years after John's encounter, Marine Lance Corporal Jonathan Weygandt was deployed to Peru as part of Operation Laser Strike, a counter-narcotics mission. His unit was sent to investigate what they thought was a downed aircraft. What they found was an enormous egg-shaped craft crashed into a cliff face. Weygandt described the surface as looking like liquid mercury. He said the craft felt alive, organic, like it was somehow a living thing. He reported experiencing telepathic communication from beings inside the craft, a sensation he described as deeply unsettling, as if something was reaching directly into his consciousness. And just like John's experience in Vietnam, men in black fatigues with no insignia showed up immediately. Weygandt was isolated from his fellow Marines, aggressively interrogated, threatened, and forced to sign documents swearing he'd never speak of what he saw. Department of Energy personnel in hazmat suits descended on the site. The entire operation had the hallmarks of a well-rehearsed retrieval protocol, as if they'd done this before, many times before. The question isn't whether these events happened. The question is what these craft are doing to the people who encounter them. Why was that the only question that mattered to the men in black? How did it make you feel? John's grandson convinced him to share his story online before he passed. He posted it on Reddit along with one photograph that survived. The image shows what appears to be a black angular craft partially obscured by jungle canopy. The quality is poor, the angle is distant, but the shape is unmistakable. It doesn't look like any aircraft that existed in 1968 or, frankly, any aircraft that exists now. In his post, John wrote something that stayed with me. He said looking at the craft made him uneasy. Not afraid exactly, uneasy. As if some part of his brain, some ancient survival instinct, recognized that what he was looking at shouldn't exist, couldn't exist. And yet there it was. That feeling stayed with him for 57 years, through his entire life, through marriage and children and grandchildren, through all the normal joys and struggles of being human. That feeling never quite left him. And when he was given a terminal diagnosis and knew his time was running out, that feeling was still there, still asking to be understood, still waiting for an answer to the question those men in black asked all those years ago. How did it make you feel? Maybe that's the real mystery, not what these craft are or where they come from, but what they do to us on a level we don't fully understand. Maybe that question, the one that seems so strange and out of place during an aggressive military debriefing, is actually the most important question anyone's ever asked about these encounters. Because if these craft affect us in ways that go beyond the visual, beyond the physical, if they interact with human consciousness itself, then we're not just talking about unidentified flying objects anymore. We're talking about something that challenges our understanding of what consciousness is, how it works, and whether we're alone in possessing it. John died not long after posting his story. His grandson said he seemed relieved to have finally shared it, as if carrying that secret for 57 years had been a weight he was grateful to set down. He never sought fame or money. He didn't want his identity known. He just wanted someone, anyone, to know that this happened, that what he saw was real, that whatever it was reached into him in a way he couldn't explain and left something behind that never quite went away. The photo is still online, blurry, distant, but there. A small piece of evidence from a dying man who had nothing left to lose and everything he needed to say. But that's just what I think. I want to know what you think. Drop a comment below, please. If you like what we're doing here, please like, share, and subscribe. It's free for you, and it really does help the channel grow. Be sure to check out all the other links below for other cool stuff. And remember, always keep an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.